There are things that wait, not with patience. Patience implies awareness of passing time, but with the absolute stillness of a mechanism designed to outlast the civilization that built it. The Solabri relay station had been waiting for 12 centuries when Serethi Voss docked at its outer ring, her shuttle trailing the amber light of the brown dwarf like a wound that hadn't closed. She came with intelligence in her hands and a question she hadn't yet learned to ask. The correspondence was Kade's, intercepted by Vex Karen through a channel that had taken 3 months and 2 dead operatives to open. Serethi had read it 4 times in transit, each reading stripping away another layer of what she'd assumed was coincidence. The cryo-revival protocol at the relay station had not triggered on its own. Cassia Morn had triggered it, deliberately, 6 weeks before Serethi arrived. The station's docking collar sealed around her shuttle with a sound like an old joint finding its socket. The airlock cycled. The air inside was cold and mineral and utterly still, the breath of a room that had not been breathed in since before the War of 9 Suns reduced House Solabri to a name you could be killed for speaking. Serethi moved through the operations chamber with her hand near her sidearm and her binding scars. Inert now, their luminous veins faded to pale traceries along her neck, responding to the station's ambient field with a faint, involuntary warmth. She felt it the way you feel a word on the tip of your tongue. Not power, recognition. The intelligence said Morn triggered the revival. The intelligence did not say why. That was the gap Serethi had been walking toward for 4 days. The cryo-chamber door opened without resistance. She spoke the pre-codex phrase Veylan had reconstructed from the station's own operational logs, her pronunciation careful and imperfect. And the door recognized the attempt rather than the execution. 12 centuries of frost cracked along the pod surface in a slow geometric cascade, each fracture line following the same angles as the script etched into the walls. Inside the pod, a woman breathed. It was not the gasp of emergency revival. It was slow, considered, as if the body remembered how lungs worked and chose to demonstrate rather than perform. The translucent alloy panels retracted in sequence. The frost fell in sheets, and Elara Solabri, last surviving member of House Solabri's ruling council, placed in cold sleep 12 centuries ago, architect of the governance substrate's final form, opened her eyes. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The station hummed around them at a frequency felt in the sternum. The brown dwarf's amber light pressed through the narrow viewport and caught the calcified binding scars tracing ivory ridges beneath Elara's warm brown skin. Old rivers carved into stone, blue-white veins turned permanent. A binding so deep the centuries had made it skeletal. The 2 women faced each other across 1,200 years of silence, their eyes the same impossible grey. Then Elara spoke. The language was progenitor, pre-codex, a dialect Serethi had never heard spoken by a living throat. And the station's walls responded. The fixed script along every surface brightened briefly, a whole room recognizing a voice it had been built to recognize. Serethi did not understand the words. She understood the station's answer. Serethi reached for her communication relay and opened a channel to Veylan on Solabri Prime. The transmission lag was 11 minutes each way. She spoke anyway, describing what she was seeing, the eyes, the scars, the dialect. And then she waited, standing in the doorway of the cryo-chamber with a woman who had been placed here before the current era began, watching Elara Solabri sit up in a pod that had held her for 12 centuries, and look around at a universe she had agreed to wake into without knowing what it would contain. Elara's first question, spoken in careful, accented standard, the standard of 12 centuries past, its vowels slightly wrong, its rhythms slightly formal, was not "where am I?" or "what year is it?" It was, did the substrate survive? Serethi told her yes, incomplete. The revocation clause had been suppressed. A woman named Kade had the fragment. A woman named Morn had used it to build a control lattice. 14 worlds were dying or capitulating. The coalition was holding but fraying. Elara listened to all of it without expression. Then she said, in the same careful, archaic standard, I was afraid of exactly that. We built the revocation clause because we were afraid of exactly that. And for a moment, the weight of what she carried was visible. Not grief, not rage, but the specific exhaustion of someone who designed a safeguard against a catastrophe and then had to sleep through its arrival. Vex Karan's secondary transmission arrived during the silence that followed. A tight beam intelligence packet routed through 3 dead drop relays, the kind of channel Vex used when she didn't want the content logged anywhere. Serethi read it standing in the cryo chamber doorway, her back to Elara, her pale grey eyes moving across the cipher text with the practiced speed of someone who had been reading choir cipher since before she knew what the choir was. Morn's second play. If Elara Solabri reached the coalition, she became a rival claimant, a pre-war council member of House Solabri, carrying a binding older and deeper than any living person's, speaking the language as a native tongue. The coalition's Death World delegates had followed Serethi because she was one of them. They had not signed on to follow a 1,200-year-old aristocrat from the house that had owned the planet they were born to die on. Morn had not triggered the revival to deploy Elara as a weapon. She had triggered it to deploy Elara as a fracture. Serethi folded the cipher packet and turned back to the room. Elara was standing. She moved carefully, relearning the weight of her own body, her hands braced against the pod's edge, her dark hair falling forward in the blunt-cut style of a court that no longer existed. The progenitor-woven shift she wore, dark blue, 12 centuries old, warm to the touch despite everything, had not degraded. Some things were built to outlast the people who made them. Serethi asked her directly, "Did you know Morn would trigger your revival?" Elara's pale grey eyes found hers. The resemblance was not subtle. It was the kind of resemblance that makes the architecture of bloodlines visible. The same reflective quality, the same quality of catching light as if storing it rather than reflecting it. Elara said, "I knew someone would. I did not know it would be an enemy." Then she said, "That is why I need to tell you what I am not, before I tell you what I am." What followed was not a speech, it was a reckoning. Elara Solabri had been placed here by a council that knew it was losing a war. She had not been placed here to rule. She had been placed here to remember, specifically to remember the revocation clause, in a form that no fragment could contain, because the clause was not written text, but a spoken operational phrase in pre-codex progenitor. The substrate self-dissolution protocol was not a document. It was a voice, her voice, 12 centuries preserved for this specific use. She was not a claimant, she was a key. On Solabri Prime, Valen Drace received Serethi's transmission 11 minutes after it was sent. He was standing at his classroom chalkboard, chalk in hand, when the relay speaker activated. He listened to Elara's voice. Serethi had left the channel open and went perfectly still. His ink-stained fingers stopped their perpetual movement. His dark eyes closed. When they opened, he turned to his nearest student and said very quietly, "Class is suspended." Then he walked to the relay terminal and began composing a response with the focused urgency of a man who has just heard a dead language breathe. On Jessard, Kale Thyros received a shorter version of the same transmission, clipped and tactical, stripped of the weight Serethi had felt in the room. He read it once, set it down on the rough-cut stone table of the bunker command center, and looked at the coloured pins on the hand-drawn map. 3 more yellow pins had been moved to red since the morning briefing. He picked up the transmission and read it again. The decision was Serethi's. He knew that. He had always known that. He reached for the response channel anyway, because there was one thing she needed to hear from someone who was not a stranger and not an ancestor: that the coalition would not fracture over a face, that the Deathworlds had followed her because of what she chose to do with what she was, not because of what she was born, that Morn's play only worked if Serethi believed it. He sent the transmission. He did not know if it would arrive in time. In the relay station's operations chamber, Serethi stood at the central console with Elara beside her. She had been watching Elara for 2 hours now, the way the woman moved through a station built for her, the way she touched the walls without reverence and without possession, the way she had asked about the substrate before she asked about anything else. Maren had taught Serethi to read people the way ash singers read dying civilizations, not by what they claimed, but by what they reached for first. Elara had reached for the substrate. Serethi made her decision in the space between one breath and the next, the way all decisions of consequence are actually made, not in the moment of announcement, but in the moment of recognition, when the question stops being a question and becomes a direction you were already walking. She opened the docking collar. She told Elara, "We leave in 20 minutes." Elara nodded once, the nod of someone who had been waiting 12 centuries for a sentence that short. Then the broadcast array activated. It was not a malfunction. The crystalline spines along the station's hull extended fully, oriented toward the galactic core, and began transmitting on a frequency Serethi recognized from Vex's intelligence briefings. A compact receiver channel, wide band, the kind of signal that reached every iron tally relay in the sector. The transmission contained coordinates, these coordinates. Serethi hit the console kill switch. Nothing happened. The array was not under the operations chamber's control. It had never been under the operations chamber's control. It was under the station's autonomous systems, and the station's autonomous systems had been waiting for a specific trigger. Elara's voice, speaking the revival phrase, confirming that the occupant had been successfully delivered to her intended recipient. Morn had not just triggered the revival, she had turned the station itself into a beacon. Elara moved to the console before Serethi could speak. Her hands, warm brown, translucent-skinned, carrying calcified binding scars from skull to wrist, found the interface panel with the ease of someone who had used it before, 12 centuries ago, when it was new. She spoke a single phrase in pre-codex progenitor. The broadcast array retracted. The transmission ceased. The silence that followed was absolute. Serethi looked at the console's transmission log. The signal had broadcast for 47 seconds. Long enough. Every compact receiver within 6 light hours had the coordinates. She looked at Elara. She said, "How long do we have?" Elara said, "Long enough if we leave now." They left. Serethi sealed the cryo chamber behind them, empty now, its purpose discharged, its 12th century vigil complete. As the shuttle cleared the docking collar and the station fell away behind them, Serethi opened channels, to Vex for extraction and a new route, to Veylan for confirmation that the revocation clause was real. Veylan's response came back 11 minutes later, his voice carrying not surprise but the weight of a confirmation long suspected. He said, "I have been teaching the substrate's operational phrases for 2 years, and I have never been able to make the revocation clause pass grammatically. 3 of its key terms only make sense in her dialect. I thought it was a translation error. It was not a translation error. It was a lock that required a specific key, and the key was never written down." In the shuttle's cramped passenger seat, Elara Solabri listened to Veylan's voice with her eyes closed, and her calcified binding scars catching the amber light of the receding brown dwarf. She said nothing, but her hands, resting open in her lap, were perfectly still, the stillness of someone who has carried a weight for a very long time and has just, for the first time, set it down in the right place. Behind them, the relay station continued its orbit. Its fixed script did not shift or rearrange. It had said everything it had to say 12 centuries ago, and the message had been delivered. What happened next was not its to carry. What happened next was theirs.